I'm Alan Spears with Occupy Democrat, and it is a bit of a bad day for Supreme Court Justices Thomas and Alito. In a bit of news that's going viral right now, Supreme Court Justice Alito has kind of gotten into some hot water as an inverted American flag was seen flying at one of his homes shortly after the January 6th riots. Now, this inverted flag was essentially an unofficial rallying cry or banner for the MAGA protesters that stormed the Capitol building on January 6th. Now, it's bad enough that a Supreme Court justice is flying an inverted American flag and seemingly lending support to the January 6th movement, but it actually gets a little worse. Additionally, Justice Alito was seen flying an Appeal to Heaven flag. Now, this flag is nothing new. It actually stems back to the Revolutionary War. However, it should be noted that this flag was also one that was flown during January 6th and was another sort of indirect rallying banner of the rioters. Now, one of the biggest reasons this is so hot right now and so controversial is that the Supreme Court is actually weighing in on a number of different cases that both directly and somewhat indirectly affect the upcoming election as well as the January 6th riots. Considering that the Supreme Court is supposed to be this impartial and unbiased force, yet we have Supreme Court Justice Alito flying the inverted flag and seemingly showing his support for one particular candidate, you can see how great of a conflict of interest this is and how this could erode, if not completely destroy, any semblance of faith in the Supreme Court as an institution. Now, it should be noted that Justice Alito has responded to this saying that it was actually his wife that flew the flag originally and that this was in some sort of response to a dispute with a neighbor. However, there have been requests and demands that Justice Alito recuse himself from these cases that are coming up with Donald Trump or that are currently in motion, especially with regards to the January 6th riots. Now, Justice Thomas has also been in the news for kind of accepting these large donations and gifts without disclosing them. There have been a wide variety of these gifts, and justices are supposed to disclose this sort of thing. However, it seems that Thomas failed to do so, and with these gifts coming from parties that do have political interests and leanings, this once again lends credence to the idea that the Supreme Court is losing its ability to be impartial. Now, I think we can all understand that pretty much everyone's going to have an opinion, and even the Supreme Court justices are going to have political leanings one way or another. In fact, we pretty well know most everyone's political alignment in the Supreme Court. The idea is, though, that they are supposed to be capable of setting aside any political bias when it comes to hearings and cases, and are supposed to be able to look beyond politics, look beyond party, and make a truly unbiased and incredibly well-informed decision. Now, with the Supreme Court now sort of demonstrating these political biases, the faith and trust in the Supreme Court is certainly shaky right now. Now, in a clip I'm about to show you, Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse actually was expressing his concern for this sort of conflict of interest, and considering the Democrats have the majority in the Senate, it's entirely possible that they could launch an investigation, conduct interviews, gather evidence, and possibly prosecute these Supreme Court justices if they don't recuse themselves. And considering that the Supreme Court justices do not have term limits, the removal of two of these conservative justices could be something we've never really seen before in our country's history. Take a look.
Often enough that we could see it as something that worked, but not anymore.
No, and one interesting feature of the recusal requirement is that it is a law passed by Congress, specifically applicable to Supreme Court justices. So when they pay no attention to it, they are actually violating statutory law. This is not one of these rules that the Supreme Court or the judicial branch come up with for themselves, where they might say, well, this is just judicial stuff. You legislators, you just run along here. No, this is the law of the land passed by Congress, and they're just flouting it.
This is such an incredibly important development and a story that you absolutely need to be paying attention to as it develops. Considering the recent events that have certainly brought to light their political affiliations and leanings, if Thomas and Alito don't recuse themselves, it's only going to serve to degrade and erode the trust in the Supreme Court, which has already been tenuous in recent years. The Supreme Court justices are supposed to be beyond party affiliation or beyond political lines. They aren't even really supposed to be considered politicians so much as they are arbiters of justice and law and order. So if these men refuse to recuse themselves from these trials, Sheldon Whitehouse, as well as the rest of the Democrats in the Senate, are absolutely well within their rights to pursue legal action against them. I think that we can all agree that our political climate and our government itself is at some of the lowest levels of trust and competency that it's ever been at. And if there's going to be any sort of restoration to this trust by the people, these justices have to do the right thing and disclose these biases and recuse themselves from cases like Trump's. These principles should absolutely be applied equally to all justices, not just Thomas and Alito, though. If we cannot have an unbiased Supreme Court and one that is free from political machinations and influence, we're in trouble. I unfortunately believe that neither of these justices are likely to recuse themselves or do the right thing, and it is more than likely ultimately going to come to the Democrats in the Senate to launch an investigation and do their best to impeach these men. And considering the fact that Biden is leading the polls as of late ahead of Trump, if he's reelected and these two justices are ultimately removed, Biden has the opportunity to appoint some actually moral individuals into the court. These are certainly unprecedented times we're living through, though, and you can be assured that we here at Occupy Democrats will be covering this story as it develops, so stick around for more.